So, hello, Jackie. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to start off by asking you to just introduce yourself and go through like your professional trajectory from college onwards to where you are now, how you landed up there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm Jackie Chitsanga, and I am currently a senior associate within our cloud and digital consulting practice at PWC. And my technology focus is Microsoft transformation. So I went to UC Berkeley back in 2019. I graduated from college in May 2019. And during my senior year, I'm actually a VP of Community Development Committee for Berkeley Women in Business. So after I graduated from UC Berkeley, I started off at PWC, which is actually my first job right out of college. My career doesn't always started off within the data field and all the consulting that were super competitive back then role. I actually started at PwC within our global mobility practice, which is a practice under tax. So what I did during my first year at PwC was I did consulting for companies that are looking to kind of transfer their employees from abroad to the US, or essentially from one country to another. We essentially help them really understand the cost, the feasibility, and also the tax implication related to it. Alongside with that, we also work with tech companies to ensure that the stock options and things like that are regulated and also aligned with the law when these employees transfer into their international assignment as well. After working there for about a year, I think I had kind of like a point in time where I feel like the kind of role that I was in initially was a little bit repetitive. And one of the projects that I got staffed on during the time that I was in tax at PwC was around tax process automation. And that's actually my first time that I get to work on, different tools. A lot of the tools that I use at PwC is called Outrex, Tableau, and Power BI. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. And that's actually my first time working with big data, learning how to automate a workflow or just like automate processing in general. And I just absolutely fell in love with working with data, working with just like companies or like internally to increase efficiency in their day-to-day job to ensure that, the work isn't always going to be repetitive going forward. And with that, with like knowing that I have a passion in data, I knew that I have to do something about it. And then the pandemics actually hit, and to transfer into like a different company or to transfer internally was super hard. So what I decided to do was I actually went back to UC Berkeley Extension to do a data analytics bootcamp for 6 months. And during those 6 months, I was actually working at the same time. Was definitely challenging, but I got through it. And halfway through that boot camp, I was actually recruited by a different team within PwC, which is now called PwC Products and Technology team. I was helping the team doing kind of like a customer success analytics and also helping out with the launch plans. That was actually my first time having used my data analytics skill, and I definitely fell in love with it. Part of me always know that I've always wanted to go into consulting, and I got really lucky to always get staff on a consulting project as a technology person, as I really do love working on data visualization and Power BI. And when things finally kind of opened up a little bit more, I was working through an internal transfer and finally land a role within cloud and digital practice at PwC. So it took me a couple of years and a couple of trajectory through a different team, but I think I'm finally at where I am, where I should be and where I want to be. So
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. You mentioned so many interesting things that I want to touch upon. The first of which, so you mentioned that you've always known you were interested in like consulting. Where, like, when did you know? What was the college process of realization, right?
yeah, definitely. So I don't think I mentioned earlier, but I was actually a transfer student. I transferred from UC Irvine to UC Berkeley. So with being a junior transfer, a lot of you may know how stressful junior year is at Berkeley. And with me coming in from a different school, trying to still like make friends, trying to still get used to, a lot of recruiting for clubs, and then trying to also like catch up on classes and all that. throughout like my club experience and all that, I do realize that I wanted to do consulting and it's something that I wanted to do. But I know that, a lot of people at Berkeley, they started preparing for consulting recruitment since like their freshman year. Like there are so many consulting clubs that I think when I first came to Berkeley, I didn't even aware that those exist. So I started to feel like, okay, my prep was a little bit too late. So, and I'm also an international student, and you know how competitive those can be when it comes to recruiting. So I essentially just go with what I know best and, just took the first job offer, which I do not recommend, but I took the first job offer that, was offered to me just to be able to remain in the US, and definitely not the wisest advice, but I do not regret it though.
Yeah, I'm international myself, and I'm not recruiting for consulting personally, but my roommate is, and she's international. She's going through it right now. So, what was that recruiting process as an international student you like, and what are some like tips or just things you would want people to know that you now know having been through it?
Yeah, definitely. I think recruiting as an international student is definitely way harder. It's always even harder given the situation of the pandemics too, with a lot of companies going through like hiring freeze or layoff and things like that. But from my perspective, when I was recruiting in 2019, the job market was super competitive back then. And from what I know, the list of firms that actually do sponsor international students are super limited. And most of the role that, do sponsor international students are often like super heavy, like technology role, like software engineer or, like data science, data engineer. With consulting, some of the firms do sponsor, but it's like super limited spot. And I think if I would have known how hard it is to, recruit for some of the role, like if I could go back, I would maybe pick up a data science minor and maybe recruit for like a business analytics or a data analytics role, or like even a tech consulting role. I think that would be something that I would, consider doing, just to be sure that, I have like the technology competitive edge, on my shoulder. I think the other thing that I would give advice is definitely like do your research early. Make sure that the companies that you are applying to actually do sponsor, because, spending time on applications, sending in resume, drafting the cover letters, those are all draining. And if the company doesn't end up like sponsoring, then I think like you're wasting your effort instead of like, I think you should always like network with your recruiter to ensure that they know your, current status, and they can confirm that like what role are being sponsored and what role are not. And especially at PWC, like we are super open and clear to tell, our interns or like our international student that are recruiting for internship or full-time positions, like which role are actually open for sponsorship and which role are not. So I do know that a lot of firms are doing the same. So like I would say, look at it early and be sure you're going after those that are actually do sponsor.
Yeah, I think that's all really appropriate for just how challenging it is to just be ahead of the curve a little bit. And you mentioned that you might have taken up a data science minor. So what role do you think your knowledge, or before you did the extension course, your lack of knowledge in data science played in everything? And do you recommend that being like a good supplementary um just skill set with consulting? What are your thoughts on data in consulting and in your role?
Yeah, definitely. So right now, my title and my team, so my team is Cloud and Digital, and I guess like my formal title is like Senior Technology Consultant. So my day-to-day honestly touch on data every single day. It just depends on, what the clients need or want. I think in terms of like incorporating what I've learned from, my data bootcamp, I would say that, not all the programs that I have learned are, being used on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes you actually have to learn your client system from scratch, or just, develop your skills based on the client's need and requirements, and like also budget and things like that. But I would say that like my knowledge in data has definitely, put me ahead in terms of being able to transfer department out of tax into products and technology into tech consulting. And it definitely give me a better understanding of, how things work, especially if I'm working with a developer as, a business analyst or a project manager or product manager within a certain team. Then I can kind of gauge, like, with this technology, how long would it take to develop a certain sprint? How long would it take to, create a project plan so that, like, our engineers and, our other stakeholders are happy and, like, agree on the timeline. So I think, like, knowing technology from, maybe like not a data scientist or software engineering standpoint would also help as well. If you want to go into like a product role or the technology role, I think knowing technology would put you into like the competitive end.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant, especially considering how impressively and exponentially you've grown within your firm. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I would just want to hear about that as well. Just how, what would what was your experience like, and what would your advice be for growing within a firm and within your role as a woman and in consulting?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, by moving around teams a lot, I definitely do feel it myself that, sometimes like a lot of people do say that if you stay at one firm for a certain amount of time, you get promoted eventually, just because like, you do know more people, you do have the relationship built and people do know your work. But for me, as someone who transfer, 2 or 3 different teams to get to where I want to be, I would say that like, one of the aspect is definitely like put yourself out there. So what I do, since I was in tax, and what I still do now is essentially I do a lot of reinvest work within the firm. And, that doesn't only showcases like the work that I do well within my team, but it essentially allow me to bring my skills outside just what I do during my project to showcase like other people within the firm, like what I can do as well. So one of the thing that I'm involved really heavily at PWC is, like SF pro bono project. So one of the project that I get to work on, essentially bringing my data skills to help out a nonprofit organization within San Francisco, and the team that come together actually like come from like different consulting teams. People come together from like director, partners, seniors, like, or even younger staff coming together as well. And I feel like getting to showcase your skill outside of your team and ensure that the people that you meet during this project, like you stay connected with them. You can always ensure that those people, especially at the higher up level, will like vouch for your work, So I feel like the relationship outside of your project and also outside of your team is definitely really important. And, I always try to go above and beyond, and also documenting all my accomplishment along the way, in order to make it super easy to, like when someone asks about me to like my coach or my relationship leader, then they know exactly like what I have accomplished throughout the year. So I do keep those lists and I share with them towards the end of the year.
That is such a good tip to just document what you do, because I think often we do blank when asked, even though we've
Yeah, when
done
the
so
time
much.
comes, like when the review times come, everyone's gonna be like, what did Jackie actually do throughout the year, and why does she deserve a promotion? So I always just write out like what I did, what kind of impact it made, who I worked with, and also kind of like who can give like a reference about my work during that time. And those are like the director or partners that I work with outside of my project team. So I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so what can you like run me through a day in the life? What is your day-to-day role like? And considering that you've been in it for a bit, how do you keep it fresh? Or like what is it about it that excites you and keeps you going every day?
Yeah, definitely. I think the question about day to day is a little bit hard, because I think day to day in consulting can be extremely different based on like the priority that comes up that day. But I can kind of run you down. So in the morning, we usually have a team stand up where we meet for 15 minutes every single day to go through, like what our priority for the day, any ask for help, any blockers. And then we also usually do have a working session with clients once or twice a day to go through, things that needs improvement, to demo any of the new development that we have made. Or we can also use that meeting time to also like come up with new ideas of the new technology we would like to build, or meet with other stakeholders that, we would like to get involved and also strategize how. Towards the afternoon, I think it's usually my working time, whether it is developing a certain technology. A lot of time it would be updating the dashboard, updating the calculation logic. Some of the times it would just be, meeting with our internal team again to strategize on how can we improve certain things. So it's kind of vague, but like essentially you meet everyone in the morning, you go through your top 3 priorities for the day. You meet with the clients again to showcase like what you have done, what you have accomplished, and what's feasible, what's not. And then towards the end of the day, we also regroup, kind of like, okay, these are what we have done. These are what we are going to leave out for tomorrow. And then we just do it again the next day. So it's very different based on the project though. So right now, my project right now, I kind of do like 50% data mapping, data visualization, and data like cleansing and insights work. And the other 50% I do like a strategy PMO side for my clients. So that's why there's a lot of like touch point between like internal teams and also like external client team as well.
And to allude to the second part of my question.
Oh yeah, what
How do you
keeps me
keep it
excited?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just like just the ability to continuously to bring my skills to build something for the clients. And I think for me, seeing positive feedback from the clients really do keep me going. I really enjoy when like I propose something or build something and the clients would just be like, oh, run with it, like come back to us if you need anything. And then when we demo something and they're like super in love with it, like sometimes they even call me like a data geek or like something like, like a guru in some like topic. And I feel like, like these kind of thing is how I feel like I've earned their trust. I've built a relationship outside of PWC. And it definitely just keep me going. And also, different people that I meet on my project team internally too. I've met a certain people in San Francisco that I continuously like hang out with and became friends with. And I think that's just like super important. And I do enjoy just like making connection with different people.
No, that sounds really fun just to have like be energized by all the people around you and the socialization that's embedded into the role. And also just the dynamic nature of it sounds very stimulating. Um, and so you touched on the good parts. What about the bad parts? What are some things within your role within consulting that you don't like as much?
I think for me, it's about like in consulting, you get staff based on the skill sets and what you know best. And I think for me, sometimes a lot of the project I get staffed on has tend to be, developing like certain dashboard, pulling out certain KPIs, pulling out certain insights. I do love that, but sometimes I, would want to step out of those areas and learn new things too. But, sometimes staffing situation can be tough based on the timing, based on the budget, and also based on whatever is available in the talent management pipeline. So I would say that like it's when you know your niche and when they know what you're good at, sometimes it's a little bit hard to step away from your own niche to try something new. But that also doesn't mean that I don't get to try other things, but that just has always been something that I'm always a little bit more cautious when the new project come up to me. I always try to make sure that at least it's like a new industry or something that like excites me, and not to just like always say yes to any project that comes up to me.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice. And then just finally to wrap up, I wanted to ask you for any just things you would say to your younger self before having joined the role that you're in, or just would say to us, the listeners, about just advice about everything.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, if I could tell my younger self, like I mentioned earlier, I would just say that like I would definitely prepare earlier, because the earlier you prepare, the more prepared you will be. And I think going back to being a transfer student, I think it seems so scary when I first arrived at Berkeley, but looking back, it was just a lot of like learning experience. So I would just say, like, do not have like imposter syndrome. Like you can do anything you put your mind to, and don't take the first job offer that you get, regardless of how desperate you are. because sometimes if you stick with something, that's like kind of define your career trajectory, and it's not always the easiest to pivot, and that's what I learned the hard way. So if you really want to do something, like go for it and work really hard for it, and you will get there.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to ask you today. And thank you so, so much for joining me and speaking to me and everyone else.